just wanted to start out and kind of read the room and see how many people save seed in this room. Guys? Awesome, awesome. Looks like almost everybody. That's great. So I'm Laura Parker. I've operated High Desert Seed and Gardens for the last 7 years out of Montrose, but we're transitioning to Paonia now, and been farming for about 17. We consider ourselves a bioregionally adapted seed company, so we're really committed to finding varieties that thrive in high altitude arid climates and really selecting and adapting them for our region. And another passion of mine is taste. So I believe that, if it doesn't taste good, why grow it? So we're always trying to curate varieties that really bring flavor forward and are bringing biodiversity to our area and continuing to keep our seeds around. So I got into this work through ranching family. So we were early weirdos, and we were early adopters of holistic management. So in my world, I kind of feel like my religion is diversity. That's what I'm about, is really promoting diversity, and I feel like that's a family trait for us. So from there, I've worked with Vandana Shiva in her seed banks in India, and really have touched in my heart that, saving a seed is elemental to civilization and being human. It's our, solemn right to save a seed. And when you're doing that, you're really tapping into something much deeper and elemental. This is the farm this season, our seed farm. Just a fun picture to throw in. This was in Montrose, so yeah. So seeds they're the first link in the food chain. They're, our cultural diversity and all of civilization really exists because we've adapted seeds through time. And, or they've maybe adapted us, we're now tied to each other. I wanted to actually explain this picture. This is in the Dehradun Valley where I worked next to the seed bank with Vandana Shiva. And this is a beautiful picture to me because what happens in Dehradun during the wheat harvest, that's what's going on here, is people from the communities come out and help the farmers harvest, and they get in trade the grain that they need for the year, which this is not new. We not so long ago also in our communities were involved all as a community in bringing in the harvest. I just think it's a really beautiful thing. It's something, I believe that, if we connect in our communities more with seeds, it's just going to be a better world. And this is a beautiful thing. So one thing I wanted to bring forward is that, we, through this selection over the last 1,000 years, it's like amazing to appreciate the diversity and the range that our domesticated crops have adapted to. Rice, there's rice that grows at sea level, and there's rice that can grow at 7,000 feet. There's rice that will grow under 20 feet of water, and rice that will grow with less than 25 inches of rainfall. That I want to put in juxtaposition to, I'm going to talk about India. India, there were 110,000 known varieties in India. Today, there are about 6,000. So, the state of diversity loss, I'm not going to go into it too much. I don't want to wail on it, but, it's happened rapidly. We've had huge changes with our agricultural systems. We've had intellectual property rights that have really pushed towards, us being dependent on large seed companies. And really, some of those seed companies are only getting from one farmer for a variety for the whole nation, for instance. So, there's been many examples of how we as humans will, start to grow just one variety to our own peril. An example, the potato famine is probably one of the most well-known one. the rust in wheat. And so part of that I wanted to bring forward today is that, to combat those things, we've gone back to our land races and our wild plants for disease resistance. I just wanted to, and that's something, our seed banks and things are, they're very underfunded, and it's not a super talked about thing, but we need to be maintaining even our wild domesticated elders. So this talk's a little bit ranging. I really want you guys to come out of this with an inspiration to take on a seed. And I'm also going to try to give you a little bit of like a background of the basics of seed saving, although it sounds like a lot of you have that. Okay, so this was another shot from the Dehradun Valley. This was the seed bank at Navdanya. These are all varieties of rice that we were cataloging and finished drying. We were finished curing them there. So you can see there's like purple varieties and red, and I just wanted to show you visually this diversity, to really appreciate it, because it's incredible. And so many of our crops have that. We didn't have this global ability to be able to send seed around. So seeds were taken and then were adapted to place, and the survivors adapted for many generations. So this is Kerry Fowler, who started the Svalbard Seed Bank. He says that if we narrow our options, we render our survival precarious. So that's something I do believe, I believe is true. And also, this is the devil's claw for you guys, behind the picture. Yeah, I love that plant. So if seed saving is collecting and saving seeds for replanting for the future, seed stewardship is the process of saving seeds for the purpose of maintaining that seed's health and resilience. So this is what I'm really calling you all to do. I'm calling you all to become deep and observational and really plant Jedis. That's going to be my next slide, but so I really want you to, potentially you take on a variety and select it over many seasons. Really become in relationship with that plant. And you are going to be doing a benefit to all of us. It's the greatest service. So I want you to become a plant Jedi. So I want you to ensure that your favorite varieties continue to exist into the future. And not just exist, not just like be around, but are evolving with us. Because in this erratic climate, we need everyone to be doing this work and adapting and creating that resilience. Because we're seeing, it's just, the environment's crazy and the plants don't like that sometimes. And then you can also select for the traits that you really care about if you do that. Select for your own growing system. These are just kind of ideas of like different flows you can take with this work. For us, we're using regenerative agricultural systems and low inputs. So that's a really important thing, that the varieties and the seeds that we're sharing do well under those conditions, because that's a future I want to support. I want farmers who are using regenerative practices. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of my seed elders and their experience with regional adaptation, and a little bit about our work with that, so in our real philosophy. Frank Morton, he says, and he's a very experienced seed elder, Wild Garden Seed, if you guys have ever heard of him. Yeah. So he basically says that, he's seen seeds adapt within 2-3 seasons. And, they're gonna germinate faster, be more vigorous plants. And and this is something that we also have experienced at High Desert Seed. Do I have it next? Not yet. Okay. So another story I wanted to tell is my friend Lance in Paonia. So Lance, you probably haven't heard of him because he's very keeps to himself in the valley, but he grows all the food, his entire diet. He grows and saves the seed. He's like a total closed loop homesteader, which is amazing. He's been doing it for about 40-some years at this point. And he's just self-taught. Lance has figured out how to save seed. He's just communicated with them and learned it. So when he tells me, he tells me it's like he's seen it be about 3 years for ones that are already pretty well producing. There's certain varieties that he's taken that are like not the great producers. He's like maybe going to drop it, but he says if you give it 7 seasons, selecting it over time, you'll see after that 7th season, it's really become quite adapted to your region. So if there's something you guys love, this is kind of the inspiration, keep saving it. Keep saving and selecting and looking for those moments when maybe you've had a tough season and only one plant survived or something, and make sure you keep that going forward. Keep that memory of that season. So yeah, there's been many, amateur seed savers and seed growers that have contributed hugely to keeping our biodiversity alive and also breeding new crops. The Blacktail Mountain is one example. Gled and Drowns in Idaho. And, he was like bicycling around and like getting other people in their backyards to grow it and making these selections because he really loved watermelon, which I can really relate to, me as well. And so he really wanted one that would work in Idaho. So he had success, and yeah, you can too. Another story I'd really like to bring forward today is the story of the delicata squash. So the delicata was being grown primarily by one farmer out east of Pueblo, Colorado. And when I say one farmer, I'm saying one farmer for the entire nation, basically, for most of the big seed companies. So this farmer had an incident where he got crossed up with a wild gourd, which makes the squash really inedible. I mean, you can eat it, but it's not so good on the other end. So they basically, for some reason, the seed company didn't have a good supply of stock seed. And so the delicata squash seed, or delicata squash, you guys all know what that variety is, right? It's pretty common now, yeah. Peanut squash. So it almost became extinct. They had to go back to amateur seed savers and small seed companies to regenerate the stock. And it didn't exist in the nation with the big seed companies for a few years because of that. So this is why this work is so important. And it's so important that we have diversity within this work, that gardeners are growing it and small seed companies, regional-based seed companies. And it's not just one farmer growing the seed for the entire nation. It puts us in peril. So, but that's my plug to support me and Jared and Brian and the seed people that that are really intentionally doing this work in a really deep way. And other varieties that have been regionally bred and selected that I just wanted to highlight are Olathe the sweet corn was actually, I know it's a hybrid, but it was regionally developed by a breeder in the south, in like Paonia, Hotchkiss, Grand Junction area, and that really, those growers that have built Olathe the sweet corn that's sold across the nation really have depended on that regional adaptation, which they're like now, there's a long story with that, but they're not finding the quality anymore because that seed isn't being bred regionally, the seed that they're getting anymore. The Mosca chili as well. It's a wonderful story of regional adaptation of Mike Bartolo. He's an extension agent, but his family had been in the Pueblo area for many, many years, and he took a sport out of his uncle's field that was had Italian and I think Mexican lineage, and he bred from that the Mosca chili right in Pueblo. So something else I'm really excited about, this is an image of a drought trial that we did this year with some work that my friend Steve Peters with Revolution Seed Now is doing, and he's dry farming tomatoes in the Eel River Valley in California. So he doesn't irrigate them at all. We trialed his stuff last season, and gave them only two irrigations, which, tomatoes, like I'm a production grower, I'm a farmer. Also, I grow food. We're told, like, you have to keep consistent water. Like, you can't, tomatoes take a lot of water, So to have varieties that did this well and were the best. They were, like, the most rich flavored, like, the flavor is just so awesome of these tomatoes. Especially, we're going to be bringing those ones up in the corner forward.
What is that?
The purple one. Magic bullet. But anyways, I just want to bring this forward to just show you the diversity that exists, even in a tomato, So we grew that with 2 irrigations and had wonderful results. So we're going to be continuing to trial and work with those genetics. But oh, yeah, and then so this is my geeky picture of the sesame that there's been a lot of talk about. So this is sesame growing. So, when I started High Desert Seed, we just kind of did everything, and we're really excited about sesame. So over the last 7 years, I've actually been growing and saving it. And I finally, this year, we had really beautiful plants, and I finally decided it was time to release it to you all. So just wanted to say, we've seen that impact of, like, really intentionally saving seeds and adapting them over time. So we'll see. Some people are growing it in this room, I think, so we'll see how they do. But yeah. So what does this really mean, like, in your backyard? So it's just really to get intimate with your crops and really just, when you save seed, you start to be more observant and notice things you never have, pollinators that are coming to them, or maybe you have a sport in one of your varieties, a different variation, and you love it, and you want to just follow that forward. Like, this is when the real beauty of seed saving comes in, But, these are the kind of things I'm talking about, just really being intentional with, which is roguing for off types, selecting for earliness, ability to thrive in low-put-in systems, heat and cold tolerance, which a lot of times we found that those traits go together, by the way, heat tolerance and cold tolerance, which, if you think about it, makes kind of sense because we're in a very hot and cold environment, erratic, Ability to withstand drought, ability to germinate in cold soils, just kind of giving you some ideas of things you can select for that we look for in our varieties. And then just really a challenge to grow out larger populations to really, if it's something you love, I think you should just save seed and have fun, and, you don't have to be serious about it, but maybe be serious about one thing that you really love. And grow it out. If it's an outcrossing, I'm going to get into this in a second, but if it's outcrosser, do try to give it a big population size so you can select for it. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you can do that in a smaller space. So the basic steps to saving a seed. Can somebody give me a time?
It is 11:53, and you have till 12:25.
Okay, great. We'll have lots of time, hopefully. So I'm going to run through this kind of fast, and so you want to start with an open pollinated variety in general, unless you're wanting a project, like a breeding project, then you could start with a hybrid or something. You want to know what your pollination system is, so that's going to inform your population size and the isolation distance that you need. You're going to grow the crop and harvest maturity. You're going to do some selection. Really, it should be like selection the whole way. Like when you're starting to grow it, you're going to select it. You can select it for vigor, like of the germinating seeds. We do that in our lettuce. We select away from the ones that are slow to germinate. But yes, selecting also any off types that you're seeing, or maybe, following them as another project. Then you're going to ripen it. As you harvest it, you want to post-harvest ripen or cure it, process, store, maybe germination test, and replant it. So I really like this visual here because it's kind of helpful to just see it as a spectrum. So basically, these are our inbreeding crops over here. So they're self-pollinating. In general, they have perfect flowers, so they have the male and the female parts. And then our outbreeders. So a lot of times those are more like our plants that have male and female flowers, maybe on separate plants or on the same plant, like squash. So separate plants like marijuana. So then, this is kind of the isolation distance. So the peas are highly selfing, lettuce. And then going that way, we're looking at the more outbreeding crops, and you need more isolation distance and bigger population size. So it's kind of helpful just to see a rule of thumb as a continuum. So I'm gonna take you through growing a biennial seed crop, just in images, and you guys are welcome to just ask me as many seed saving questions as you have afterwards, or jump in, I guess. I guess don't jump in because we're on camera. But yeah, so I'm gonna do a leek to seed. So basically we grew the leek to harvest maturity. We grew it all season. And then we actually pulled them up and replanted them about September. So this is when we did our selection. So you can see we selected here for the nice big roots here in the Musselburgh Giant crop. And that's what it looked like. This one's not that rugged, but some of them looked pretty rugged coming out of the winter. This is coming out of the winter after these were planted. So then they went through the whole winter. We spaced them out a little bit more, which is something, if you're growing in a small scale, you could maybe forget that. Because part of our, we're growing seeds for production. So we need to give them a little more space. This one, you could probably tighten them up a little bit, and you're going to maybe reduce the amount of seed set that you get, but you'll still get seed. Here they are. So there's a phase where they're very tenuously putting up these little tiny bulbs, like little triangles coming up like little snakes, and then they start to bloom and open up, and they're just like little, and then they get so big, huge blossom heads, and they're drawing in all kinds of pollinators, and this is where it gets really fun. So this is an outcrossing crop. It has a really interesting mechanism to where the pollen and the stamens become receptive at different times. So it's called protandrous, but you don't really need to know that. But it's kind of fun. So it's to ensure that it has a large genetic breadth, because it's an outcrosser. It's being pollinated by bees there. Yeah, so here's, I snuck a lettuce in for curing for some reason, but and this isn't leeks, this is another allium, but here's some post-harvest ripening. These we would harvest when they're just barely starting to show black seeds opening up. And then as they dry with the stalk, they'll open up much more and shed the seed there. So this is the dancing on the seeds, the threshing part of the business. So I snuck another one that's not a dry seeded crop in. So we do a lot of like stomping on tomatoes in buckets and bins, and then of course fermenting them. So that's a wet seeded crop. And that's some of my first crew members dancing on the seeds there. So they're threshing a brassica crop there. So we do a lot of that. So, sometimes with the alliums we're a little more gentle, but we'll still sometimes work them with our feet a lot of times. Yeah. So the threshing would be like separating the seed from its seed head. So there we are. I think that's one we're doing an onion there. That's probably the Brownstein pasta onion. So we're just using a screen and rubbing it through a screen for threshing that one. Okay, so then we're gonna do a lot of different screening to get going. So we've already screened this through a bigger screen, kind of you can see them behind May there. Just using a flat, like a bottom tray of a garden flat, like we use that a lot, And then what we're doing is, this is when I put this picture in because this is like one of my favorite things, which is like with the brassicas or any dry seeded crop, kind of like gently lifting and piling the seeds up and like loosely like letting it fall. And what you're doing is you're getting the seeds that are heavy to kind of fall to the bottom and quickly kind of, they call it scalping off the light chaff. But anyways, it's quite a beautiful thing to do. It's a beautiful part of the process. But after this phase, and I couldn't find a good picture, but we're going to be winnowing. So we're going to be using wind to blow away the chaff, but also to cut out the unviable seed. So we're going to be, blowing away the lighter seeds as well. Yeah. 20 minutes? Okay. And this is another wet seed processing. Getting a little crazy with my pictures. But this is in our current Paonia house, in our old Victorian. We just took it over with the seed business this winter. It was a little crazy. But we're vacuuming out the seeds with the shop vac, which works really good if you got a lot to do. And also it's nice to have a shop vac with the hose that's kind of bumpy, because it kind of helps to get the squash flesh off. That was the caserta. Okay, so the final step is storage. I put this in here for Jared. So this is in Rajasthan. And this was, I have a very difficult, challenging relationship with camels. So I happened to be on a camel going through this village. And I was like, what is that? It was the only door with a lock on it in this village that we were in. We were in Rajasthan, and it was on the border between basically India and Pakistan. My mom was like, oh my God, what are you doing there? But I asked the camel herd what it was, and they said it was the seed storage for the village. The only door with it was painted beautifully and, lock on it. And you can see it's rodent proof. It's probably got thick walls to keep it an even temperature. And and it's cool and dry. And also, the shape reminds me of Jared's pots. So anyways, that's another part of seed saving. So when we're talking about being a seed steward in a small space, I wanted to go into a little bit of some ways that you can get creative, because sometimes we have to get creative. So you can isolate in time. If we're talking about corn, sometimes you can plant like 2 weeks between and have different varieties of corn coming in the same season. You can hand pollinate corn as well, and that's how Dave Christensen, if you all know Painted Mountain Corn, he did a lot of hand pollinating in that breeding work. You can hand pollinate melons. I haven't actually done melons yet, but we regularly do squash, and I'm gonna actually tell you guys how to do that in a sec, if we get to it. For peppers, you can use insect netting to isolate the varieties. We do a lot of that on the farm. They're also, in our climate that's so dry, they're not going to outcross that much. But isolating your hot peppers from your sweet is probably a good idea, because it's really hard to tease that genetics out once you get a hot into a sweet. So I would definitely recommend using insect netting or a little bit further isolation, 50 feet at least, maybe. And then for outcrossing crops, it's like I said, it's it probably is okay in our dry climate, especially because there is a reason to have them spread out because of disease, but to squeeze them in a little tighter, and you're going to trade off in terms of how much seed they produce. So, that's a little bit of maybe some other seed people will disagree with that in the room, but I feel like if you're trying to do it on the backyard scale, you probably get away with that. So and you can do it. It's really fun work. It's like, all this stuff about isolation distance and stuff. Don't get too bogged down into it. Just save seed and be observant and let the plants speak to you. So, and up here, that's a carrot going in. So that was held through the winter and then selected. I think that's the Scarlet Keeper maybe. And it's going back into, and that's a garden bed. That's a 40-foot bed, I think, that we did. And we did squeeze it in a little bit. And because we had about 200 stecklings in that planting. That's what we usually do. Do you guys want me to talk about hand pollinating squash? Okay. So they're dioecious plants, so they have male and female flowers on the same plant. So when you're going to go to hand pollinate, you gotta get up early like the bees, because the bees are out at work very early. So, and also at night. So at first you're going to go out and tag and tape all of the flowers that are about to open, male and female, so that you can see this one. It's kind of orange all the way to the tips. There's different varieties have a little bit different keys, but as you start to learn, or as you start to do this, you'll start to get more observant to when it's going to open. So you have to like learn, that you want to catch them like the day before their flower is going to open. So in the evening, you're going to go out and tag the females. You can see the unpollinated ovary there, and then the male on that side. And you're going to tape them shut and flag them. That's what we do usually. So we're just using painter's tape there. You could use a paper clip. Yeah. And then in the morning, you're going to come and you're going to harvest your males off the plant. You're going to demasculate them or just pull their petals off, and use that like the pollen as like a paintbrush, and go around to your females and paint them. So yeah, and you want to do that as early as you can in the morning. And then you're going to close that flower back up so that no bees get in there, which they're really quick and really effective. So you gotta be really watching that. Yeah, and then you're gonna want to tag it with something so that as it grows, you know that that's one of your hand pollinated squash. It's pretty easy, right? Yeah. Yeah, so there you can see all of our flags of stuff I was hand pollinating 1 August, probably the first couple weeks of August is when we're doing it. This is a good shot of the seed farm there. And yeah, there's like a tepberry growing over here. I like all the rainbows. I always got the rainbows in. Yeah, so
I have a
just
question.
seeing what I had on there. Yeah.
Tell us why you would hand pollinate.
Oh yeah. That's a good point. So yeah, so if you wanted to grow, for instance, 2 maxima type squashes in the same season and save their seeds, they will outcross. And so, because you'd need 800 feet isolation or more to keep them separated. So yeah, that's why you'd hand pollinate, is then to ensure that you're keeping that true to type and not letting them cross. Yeah. Does that explain it?
And that's because melons and squash will do that versus other varieties that don't.
Yeah, so they're more outcrossing because they're generally insect pollinated. So unlike a lettuce, so a lettuce is a really good one to start with. Lettuce or peas that are super self-pollinating. So you guys, I teach a much more in-depth seed saving class, and I'm actually considering teaching it online to start out doing that, because it was part of my goal when I started this company too, to really share information more about seed saving and inspire. If you put me out of business, that'd be fine. That'd be great. It'd be awesome. I don't see that happening, but but it'd be great. So anyways, but that I can explain these things more thoroughly. But yeah, they're perfect flowers. So they have the male and the female flower parts in one flower. And so generally those ones are going to be more selfers. Although that allium also has perfect flowers. It just has a mechanism for encouraging outbreeding, which is part of its survival. When it's an outbreeding crop, it needs a deep, a broader genetic breadth. It's something when you're growing seed actually, and you're working with an outcrosser, you want to keep in mind. One of my mentors, John Avazio, always talks about in carrots that you want to throw out the uglies, but you kind of want to have a range within the type that you're selecting for, because you don't want to narrow those genetics too much. And that's something. We were talking a little bit with some folks at the booth, with our landrace Hopi purple bean, and that's something there's resilience in that inherent diversity in those varieties.
I had a question about saving a varietal and becoming like a champion for that seed and bringing it back year after year. So, but the problem is that something like a pea that I got from a coffee can after a funeral of a beloved friend, and I've been growing it, and I just call it Paul's field pea, and I've been growing it, and now I'm like, shoot, I don't know what the varietal is, I don't know, but I've saved this seed, and I love it, and is there a way to find out the varietal, or to give it my own name and make it something? And
I think you give it your own name, and name it something, and if you're working with it for so many years, it's like it probably has changed somewhat to what you've selected. So I think that's okay to give it its own name. Yeah. It is a challenging, when we're seed companies, it becomes a little more like, where's the line for us is maybe a little different, but I think you do that and share it in your community, and that's so beautiful. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is a very, very beginner embarrassing question, so I'm
They're so
duck down from the
embarrassing
camera. I'm total newbie. From what I heard from yesterday, and then maybe you could answer, if I am saving seeds for the first time, I ate a pumpkin and I saved the seeds, after I ate it.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday it sounds like you should dry it first, and you shouldn't save the seeds from the one you just ate. And I grow squash in the backyard, so I'm going to do it better this year, depending on what you tell me.
No, so with squash, you're actually you're actually post-harvest curing it too with squash. It was like a winter squash.
It was the pie pumpkin I got from the farmer's market is the one I was asking about, but I grow squash
Yeah.
also.
Yeah, so they've actually, they've brought that to full maturity. And then the farmer hopefully has cured that properly. And so the seed is totally at the right stage to save.
So what does cure
mean? So in winter squash, we're letting it be exposed to a warmer temperature for a period of time before we put it into storage. So usually in the sun.
After you pick
or in a
it?
dry climate. Yeah.
Okay, so if I'm going to do my squash,
But-
so when they're ripe, I pick it and then just let it sit on the counter for a while and then get the seeds when I eat it?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I did it right.
Yeah. You did it right. Yeah. Any other questions?
So I know you just said that you might be shifting, offering this seed saving course online, but will you tell us any other ways that you offer it already?
Well, I prefer doing things in person. So I've taught a lot of different seed saving classes in the Norwood, Montrose, Paonia region. So I don't have anything scheduled, but I'd love to come over here and do one sometime. Yeah. So that would be super fun. Mostly in the fall is when I have time to do that kind of thing in teaching, but yeah. So I don't have a good answer for you yet, but maybe we can figure something out. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, this last slide that I put up here, if I can go the right way. Oh yeah, this is the seed farm in the fall. We're doing heavy seed harvesting. It's actually, seed farms get a little wild at the end of the season, because we've got plants that have come to full fruition, and a lot of times they totally transform and become a whole new thing. Like I keep thinking about it, like when we grew beets to seed, and they become like these huge bushes, and they're like kind of like dreadlocks, and you're like, what? This is, I walk my friends around, and I'm like, yeah, that's a beet going to seed, and they're like, what? Because it totally transforms. So that's one of the beautiful parts I think about seed saving. Is you really, seeing them go to fruition, you really engage with the plant in a whole new way. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the thing I like to get from our customers. this is a little poem that one of my customers wrote me, who kind of farms kind of between me and Telluride, so in the mountain, basically. So she says, they are the seeds who insisted that the growing season was not too short, that a hard summer solstice freeze is not too late, that the mountain soil was not too unamended, and that 95,000 feet is not too high to be vivaciously and abundantly expressive from first leaf to harvest. So, yeah, so this is really what gives me energy to keep doing this work, to see these seeds going and being successful in everybody's homes and farms. So. Oh, Jared's going to ask me a question?
I have a question. Well, when I described you and Brian's work up in the high altitude breeding, selecting seed over seasons, I described to people, I always send you as a reference for anybody looking to grow anything that they have a shorter, they just need something that's going to bomb. And I tell people, look, if it does well up there, if they're already offering it, it's going to do really good where you are, right? Because you're like, I kind of describe the seeds in a relatively similar climate. I'm talking about taking it to the tropics, right? But like taking it to a relatively similar climate.
Yeah.
And I kind of describe your seeds as like a high altitude, like how runners go to train up in the high altitude, right?
Yeah. And
then when they come back down, they crush it. Is that kind of a relatively honest analogy?
When I started High Desert Seed, that was actually my theory, because a lot of seed elders actually had told me, that's a horrible place to grow seed. You can't do it, And I was like, well, I think I'm going to do it, I guess I'm just a little stubborn. But and part of the reason I wanted to do it and felt like it was important, because I did feel like, we're getting an erratic climate, and, climate change to me is happening. And I felt like growing in the marginal climates is really important to adapting seeds to be able to have that resilience in that change. So, yeah, I think that's our tagline, is hardy seed for hardy souls. So, because I feel like mountain people are some of the hardiest people, and I believe our seeds are as well. So, yeah. Well, I hope you guys, this provided you some inspiration to go become seed stewards, but also just save seed with abundance. And yeah, just do it. Get out there. We need everybody saving seeds. So, and thank you so much for coming. Yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah.